Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other, and today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 23, Blues for Sister Someone. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So as always, we'll start with the patients. The first patient that we have is a woman who has been in the hospital for a few days as they wait for her to have a seizure so that Derek can map the seizure and remove the part of the brain causing the seizures through surgery. And George and Izzy are assigned to help her induce a seizure, so they try sitting really close to the TV, playing video games with flashing lights, drinking a lot of coffee, and a few other tricks that are supposed to potentially cause seizures, all to no avail, but the patient ends up having more fun than she's had in years. And when Izzy and George start fighting about their fading friendship, how George isn't telling her anything, how George partially blames her for what happened with Meredith because Izzy was the one who kept encouraging him and pushing him to tell Meredith to make a move on Meredith, even though she knew, obviously, as everybody else did, that Meredith didn't have any feelings for George in return. And they start fighting in front of the patient. The patient finally has her seizure and realizes that the cause of the seizure is watching people fight, and so decides that instead of being a divorce lawyer, she's going to change her life, avoid having people fight in front of her, and hopefully have a much better outcome without the need for surgery. However, she does promise that if that doesn't work and she does have seizures again, she'll come back and let Derek into her brain, but ultimately a happy ending for her. We then have Addison, who is assigns Krev to her case, who doesn't want it because he's not interested in her field of surgery. And he has a bad attitude pretty much the entire episode about her case, and she's dealing with a mother who's on her 7th child, does not want to have any other children. However, because her husband is very religious, she basically wants to secretly tie her tubes and have no record of it that her husband can see to basically make sure she can't have any other children while trying to protect her husband's religious sensibilities. And Addison, while doing the C-section, does in fact sever the fallopian tubes, which will prevent her from being able to have any children any further, and lets her know that it's a complication that occurred during the surgery. Oops, too bad. However, the husband does not take it well and approaches Karev, and because Karev was never on the patient's side, believing that, she should have been honest with her husband, they should have had a conversation and appropriate communication, basically tells the husband to get a lawyer, so the husband then goes to Richard, who then has him speak with the hospital lawyer, which of course is a detriment to Addison's reputation. However, the patient who asked her to do this has no remorse and no care about her career or reputation. She's just happy she got what she wanted. Screw the consequences. And so Addison is left in a bad place. And then the last patient was Burke's patient. Well, okay, partially last patient. The last single episode patient was Burke's patient, who was his hero violinist, that he had 43 records of his music, was inspired by his quotes growing up, so on and so forth. And basically, a few years ago, he put in a pacemaker. However, this pacemaker prevented this musician from being able to play in the way that they had played before, as I guess they used their heartbeat to keep their rhythm, and now that their heartbeat is forcibly steady due to the pacemaker, they can't play the way that they had in the past. And so he's asking Burke to take the pacemaker out, even knowing that it's risky, could end with his life lost. But if he can't play the way he wants to play, then that is a sacrifice he's willing to make. So Burke does do the surgery. Unfortunately, it does not go well, and he does lose the patient, which has a large impact on him that Christina has to comfort him from. And then the final patient would be Denny, who Izzy, because she has feelings for him, is trying to convince him to take the safest path and option. However, Denny wants to get out of the hospital, and so he has an option that will make him more mobile that Izzy is against. Bailey and Meredith, who are on his case that day, do convince him that he is a prime candidate for a more mobile device, and so he does ultimately take their advice. He is able to stand and walk around, and Izzy is a little bit sore that he didn't take her advice. However, because it all worked out, she is happy for him, and they do share what would appear to be like their first proper hug, where she mentions that like he's tall because he finally can stand, move around. But this also ends up with Bailey realizing that Izzy is falling for a patient. Meredith talks to Denny, but Denny basically says, like, Izzy's not the type to follow the rules, she'll follow her heart. And then, of course, when they are hugging, Bailey does see this. So a bit of foreshadowing there. And then we have some drama, and most of the drama was tied up with the patients this time. However, one piece of drama that wasn't was that Derek and Addison were having trouble being intimate as it was not satisfying for them. And additionally, Meredith has decided to start dating Finn, who um, at first she declines dating him, but then she decides she's going to date him, and they go on their first somewhat of a date where says he'd love to go on a date with her, but he has to run an errand. She invites herself along for the errand. He brings her. They birth a horse. It's adorable. But because they're covered in gunk when they get back to the vet office, she goes to take a shower. Derek comes in, sees that she's coming out with wet hair from the living quarters because the vet lives above his practice. And basically, he's bringing in Doc. When he gets home, he's a bit upset. So he then uses his frustration or hurt or whatever the case, or jealousy or whatever it is about Meredith moving on with the vet to finally have what we presume to be non-bad physical intimacy with Addison to end off this episode. So now that we have been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episodes. As always, we rank on two ranking lists. We rank on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score, and then we rank on the personal list, which is based on opinion. So now we come to our mostly objective rank values, and as always, we start with our one-pointers, which is our single episode supporting character introductions, and those are our patients for this episode. So we have Gwen Grabber, who is the seizure patient, Eugene Foote, who is the violinist that is Burke's hero, and then Rose Ward, who is the woman who ruins Addison's reputation and potentially has a negative impact on her career because she's too scared to talk to her husband and have a healthy communication within her marriage. And then we have the supporting relationship development, which is first off Meredith agreeing to date Finn, and then they go on their first somewhat of a date. They're running an errand together, which is that Finn is going to birth a horse, and Meredith joins him, which I think is a really fun and cool idea for a first date if you are dating a vet. Either way, fun times, lots of progress there, worth 2 points. And then the other one, I was debating whether or not this would count for points, but ultimately I decided to give it points. And that is that Denny and Izzy are able to, basically, because Denny got his machine, he and Izzy are able to have like a proper stand-up hug for the first time. And They hug for a long while. She closes her eyes, comments on his height. Like, it's a very romantic coded. Oh, I hate that I said that. It's a very romantic feeling moment between them, even though it's just a hug, because of the fact that he's been in bed pretty much since they met, and this is the first time that they're actually able to have a hug standing up. And also the fact that Bailey sees it, which means that she now has some confirmation that Izzy is, in fact, having a relationship with a patient that is stronger than a doctor-patient relationship. So I gave it the 2 points as well. Plus, if I'm willing to give points for like a look, which I have in the past, a hug is definitely worth the points then. Um, and then the final positive points for this episode was our multi-season main character growth. And as mentioned, when they are helping Gwen, Izzy and George start to fight, and this is about Meredith. And up until this point, we've been seeing that their friendship has been more distant, and it's the fight that basically brings everything to the surface so that they can argue about it. And once Izzy leaves because of leaves the room, Gwen basically tells George that she has been watching people fight in front of her for 15 years, and people who fight the way that George and Izzy did always love each other, and that she misses her friend. And so George then, having had this argument and getting that advice from the patient, then decides to bring Callie with him back to Meredith's house, where he's still paying rent, and essentially confirms that he is going to move back in, which of course Izzy is happy about, though she tries not to show it too openly. And anyways, it's growth for George because obviously he moved out because he was so hurt by everyone in the house, so the fact that he's willing to move back in is showing some growth to his character. That's worth 4 points. But we do have some negatives. First negative is that there was some negative messaging or behavior. I've already said the Denny Izzy thing bothers me, and I've said that in multiple episodes. I'm not going to replay it here or take points for it here. I'm just going to say that I think there's nothing wrong with, the relationship starting that way. Like when you meet the person that you're meant to be with, you can't really control where you meet them, so I don't have a problem with the meet cute or the development of feelings. However, once those feelings developed and once you had decided you wanted to see where it would go, Izzy should have removed herself from the case, made her superiors aware that there is now an emotional relationship there, and been taken off the case and now be treated like the family member or friend of the patient, not as the doctor. And obviously, I've already said this before, I'm not taking yet more points for it. I'm not. But I'm still honorably mentioning it because it does bother me quite a bit. However, what I'm actually taking the points for, minus 2 points, is the kind of under the table surgery dealings that Addison goes with. I mean, she's a doctor, and I feel like a patient making that request would potentially make that request. However, just ethically as a doctor, I don't think she should have gone through with it, especially calling it like a complication and hiding it in that way. I mean, say yes that you would do the surgery, but indicate that it was requested by the patient, allow her to pay in cash, maybe, like, so like that the invoice doesn't get mailed to the home, but have it be like sent to her or something like that. I think the way Addison went about it, doing it kind of like a black market dealing, like under the table, fake a complication, especially when the complication, according to other doctors, did not medically make sense, was the wrong move because now her career and reputation are damaged. Plus, putting that kind of faith in a stranger, risky business. I mean, trust, like giving a certain level of trust to someone that you just meet who hasn't lost your trust yet, give them a neutral level of trust and then let them earn more trust or lose trust. But like putting full trust in someone that like that this woman's going to do the right thing. She's already lying, unwilling to talk to her husband. She's already trying to make these secret little deals. Like, that's not a trustworthy person. I'm sorry, it's not. A healthy relationship has healthy communication. And, if you have these types of concerns, have these conversations, see what kind of options you can follow through with. But you should have that conversation with your spouse and then come to a mutual decision in order to, what I'm trying to say is basically, you're in a marriage, you have a bunch of kids. This type of decision should be talked about. You should have healthy communication. If you can't talk about it with your spouse, then there's something wrong with your marriage, and you shouldn't be taking it out on an innocent doctor who's trying to help you. That being said, Addison should not have done that because it is unethical, in my opinion. And she is right that, like, her patient is Rose. She's advocating on behalf of the patient, and she should advocate for the patient. But going ahead and doing a secret surgery that she's not going to bill for to help a patient, I feel is a bit farther than a doctor needs to go to advocate or be on their patient's side. And there were other doctors, like if Addison wouldn't do it, she could have gone to some other doctors. She could have kept her morals, kept her integrity, kept her reputation and career intact by making a different decision, which she did not make. Therefore, I am taking the points because it ultimately was Addison's choice, and it was a bad one. And then last but not least, yet another -2 points for supporting relationship regression or breakup. I'm considering it a regression because we did have in the past Addison and Derek struggling to be intimate. However, we were then seemingly led to believe as the audience that that was resolved because they began to be intimate again. However, now we find out that in fact it was never resolved, or if it was resolved, it's backslid again to where they are physically intimate, but it is not good physical intimacy. And I don't consider it to have improved to be worth positive points or canceled out because the so-called let's have good intimacy that Derek proposes at the end of the episode is not coming from a good place or a place founded in their relationship. It's because he went to the vet to he brought Doc to the vet to find Meredith there and got jealous and so decided to come home and sleep with his wife and be good at it in the shower and change things up and such. So I still don't consider that really like a improvement because it's coming from a negative place of jealousy potentially. And obviously, like I said, in previous episodes, it was presumed based on how episodes ended that they had resolved some of these issues, and now we find out that they haven't, so regression. Anyways, with all of those points being calculated, we then come to the final conclusion that this was a 7 out of 10 episode objectively. So now we come into our season 2 rankings so far. On our mostly objective side, and in first we have Make Me Lose Control, Into You Like a Train, Begin the Begin, Tell Me Sweet Little Lies, Break On Through, As We Know It, What Have I Done to Deserve This, The Name of the Game, Deny, 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 Thanks for the Memories, It's the End of the World, Enough is Enough, Something to Talk About, Let It Be, Much Too Much, Yesterday, 17th, Superstition, Bring the Pain. This episode is 19th, Blues for Sister Someone, Band-Aid Covers the Bullet Hole, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, Owner of a Lonely Heart, and then Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. Bringing us now to the personal ranking. And I agree with the objective ranking in this one. I liked some aspects of the episode. I like the progression for, Izzy's relationship with George starting to be resolved and healed now that George has Callie. she's helping him to kind of move on from maybe the dark pit that he had ended up in, and he's made that decision consciously to try to move on. Um, I like the I like that Finn um is considered to be less than a doctor by Christina, but I have to say I actually disagree with that because with being a doctor to people, your patient can communicate with you, tell you what's wrong, tell you what they're feeling. You have a lot to go on with the assistance of the patient versus like a vet. Your patient cannot communicate you have to like with you have to kind of intuit what's wrong and, you know, go off of limited information tests in order to try to help and treat an animal. So I actually think a vet maybe has it a little bit more difficult being a doctor to an animal versus to a person. So I disagree with Christina there, but I did find that aspect funny when Meredith was debating on whether she wanted to go on the date with Finn. Ultimately, she does decide to go on the date with Finn, though she does maintain that she is planning to remain celibate. He says that he wants to go on the date with her, but he has an errand to run. She goes on the errand with him. It's birthing a horse, which, like I said, I think that that is a very fun little twist that they put in there for kind of the semi first date, that she gets to help him, you know, help a horse give birth. And then, of course, she's covered in goo. She decides to stay whilst maintaining that she is planning to stay celibate. And I think that that also is a cute little flirty moment between them. And then obviously Derek catches her coming out, which adds drama. So that was the fun part of the episode. I did think it was fun when Izzy and George were helping Gwen to try to induce a seizure. Is basically like a fun day where they got to like watch TV, play games, eat a bunch of donuts with coffee, things like that. That was also fun. Again, their relationship starts to improve. That's a good thing. And then we also get foreshadowing of future drama with Bailey finding out or confirming in a way that Izzy and Denny are more strongly involved than a patient and doctor should be, even a close patient with doctor. Um, Burke's sort of concern. I did like that it did, like that he put the pacemaker in his hero. His hero comes back to get it out. He ends up losing him on the table, and you can really feel that he is depressed by this and that it does have an impact on him. However, much like George, like he's not my favorite character, so his sort of side plots don't necessarily interest me personally very much. But I did think that it was a good moment for the character, though we haven't seen the full impact because it was like at the end of the episode, so I'm assuming we'll see the impacts to the character in future episodes. So I didn't assign or remove any points for it in this case yet, but I think that they are foreshadowing again future dramas. As to what I don't like, I did not like the patient Rose. And I don't think that she was meant to be necessarily as dislikable as she is. I think it comes from where you come from. Like, obviously, there are some people who are very religious and allow religion to dictate certain aspects of their life. But you knew that going into the marriage. You knew that throughout having many other children. You knew this about your spouse. You know this about your spouse. You can have those conversations. You're supposed to have those hard conversations with your spouse, the person that you have committed to, the person that you have decided to be in a strong relationship with for the rest of your life, that you have chosen to have these children with. And putting a doctor in that kind of position obviously is crappy, though I can understand. Well, no, I don't understand because, like I said, I feel like there should be communication in a marriage. If you have chosen to be in a marriage, to commit yourself and spend your life with another person, you should be able to have these kinds of difficult conversations with them and to come to a solution that you both are comfortable with. And that's kind of where Karev's side was. So I was kind of on Karev's side in this particular arrangement. I obviously did not like the choice that Addison made. Karev going behind her back, though, and telling the husband to get a lawyer, indicating that obviously something was done incorrectly, instead of just going on with the complication, was a bit shitty from like a personal perspective, but from an ethical standpoint as another doctor, I'm not against him on that. I do think he did the right thing. Addison, I think, did the wrong thing. And then Rose really lost me when she refused to make it right for the doctor, who did what she asked and then now is being penalized for it. It is fairly penalized because Addison did do something that I would think would be unethical and is not a good look for her. But at the same time, it was the patient who asked, and the patient should own up to that, given that it has gone to the point of a lawsuit, which she hadn't anticipated. So ultimately, that entire subplot, that entire decision and aftermath, etc., did not like, did not enjoy, took off all the points for that, and that is why it is a 7 out of 10 episode, which now brings the personal ranking so far to in first as we know it. It's the end of the world, make me lose control, raindrops keep falling on my head, something to talk about, into you like a train, break on through, deny, 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 let it be, tell me sweet little lies, the name of the game, begin the begin, this episode is 13th, blues for sister someone, thanks for the memories, much too much, yesterday, 17th is superstition, enough is enough, bring the pain, grandma got run over by a reindeer, what have I done to deserve this, owner of a lonely heart, and in last so far, Band-Aid covers the bullet hole. So now we come to the series ranking so far, and on our mostly objective ranking, Season 1 ended with 77.78%, and Season 2 so far has a score of 181 out of 270. On the personal ranking side, Season 1 ended with 66.67%, and Season 2 so far has a score of 157 out of 270. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 23, Blues for Sister Someone. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.